Between 1948 and 1970, a remote Catholic seminary in upstate New York reported a pattern no agency officially tracked. 25 priests, all former seminarians or visiting faculty, were documented as having left without notice or explanation. Most were recorded as having requested transfers. A few were marked as deceased, though no death records were located. One was listed as a defector. But across hundreds of documents, one detail repeated: no follow-up, no investigation, no return. Founded in 1913 by the Diocese of Syracuse, St. Benedict Seminary presented itself as a disciplined haven of religious formation. Perched on a wooded hill near Lake Esquiline, the facility maintained an austere curriculum focused on Latin liturgy, theological orthodoxy, and absolute obedience. Its catalogue emphasized high placement rates in diocesan ministries across the Northeast. Visitors remarked on its silence, order, and isolation. Internally, the seminary issued annual reports to the archdiocese listing student attrition, ordination yields, and clergy placement. No irregularities were publicly noted, but former staff described a pattern of abrupt departures, usually preceded by faculty disputes or internal inquiries. Few records survive. Shall I begin with Chapter 1, Part 1? Within diocesan records, the faculty appointments at St. Benedict Seminary showed unusual patterns of rotation. Priests who arrived as instructors were often reassigned within 2 to 4 years. Several received titles with no clear duties, such as liturgical observer or pastoral liaison. In multiple instances, their names vanished from official registries after these postings. No correspondence remained in their clerical files. One such case was Father Stephen Harlow, noted in the 1952 Diocesan Yearbook as teaching ecclesiastical Latin at St. Benedict. By the spring of 1954, his name no longer appeared in seminary bulletins, staff rosters, or parish assignments. His departure was not acknowledged in that year's transfer reports. Diocesan logs later listed his status as personal leave, a classification used only 3 times in the seminary's history. The form lacked a departure date. Several administrators from that period were later queried during a diocesan review conducted in the 1980s. None recalled the specifics of Harlow's assignment. A former archivist noted that his file had been removed from the archives entirely by 1963. 2 index cards remained, one with a handwritten notation in red ink. No return correspondence. The seminary's internal structure was opaque to those outside its leadership circle. Canonical supervision was officially under the Bishop of Syracuse, but most daily operations were managed by the rector and 3 department heads. The rector during the bulk of the 22-year period in question was Father Albin Marchand, appointed in 1947. His appointment followed a closed disciplinary inquiry at a Midwestern parish school, but no records from that case were made public. Marchand ran the seminary with formal precision, issuing annual reports, curriculum updates, and theological statements to the chancery. He seldom traveled and rarely allowed faculty to attend off-site conferences. A diocesan memo from 1959, marked archival only, noted that Father Marchand requested the installation of an internal communication system connecting administrative offices with the dormitory annex and chapel. According to building maintenance logs, wiring was installed but never activated. No explanation was provided. The same year, faculty meetings were moved from the main library to an unused storage room in the south wing. The stated reason was soundproofing. Former seminarians recalled that faculty presence was inconsistent. Professors often failed to return after holiday recess or mid-term breaks. Official explanations were limited to vague announcements during morning liturgies. Phrases like assigned elsewhere or recalled by the bishop were common, though students had no means of verifying these claims. Alumni directories from the 1960s show multiple blank entries under the heading Ordination Class of. One alumni record for the class of 1958 includes 7 names. Of these, 3 are listed as no record located. One was later found to have joined a teaching order in Spain, although no documentation from St. Benedict confirms a transfer. The remaining 3 were traced to diocesan assignments in Buffalo and Pittsburgh. None agreed to be interviewed for diocesan inquiries conducted in 1979. The diocesan archivist who conducted the 1979 review noted discrepancies in housing records. Dormitory registries from the mid-1950s frequently included names that did not correspond to enrollment logs. Several entries had incomplete surnames or initials without given names. One entry, dated March 3, 1956, included the name F. Denton, with a question mark inserted by a later hand. No individual by that name appears in diocesan directories, payroll ledgers, or tuition receipts. A seminarian who briefly served as sacristan in 1964 reported to the archivist that certain rooms in the old faculty residence were always locked, even when unoccupied. He recalled being told not to use the third-floor stairwell after dusk. No rationale was ever offered, and the policy was not written into campus handbooks. Building plans filed with the county assessor indicate that by 1960, the seminary included 3 classroom wings, a dormitory building, a chapel, a dining hall, and 2 small outbuildings designated as caretaker lodges. No caretaker was ever listed on payroll during those years. A diocesan maintenance report from 1966 noted repairs to a secondary water line that supplied the lower building near the forest edge. The plumbing contractor, a private firm from Utica, listed the work order under storage facility, though no permit for storage use had been filed. Later testimony from a diocesan surveyor suggested that no electrical wiring existed in that structure. When the surveyor attempted to inspect it in 1972, the building had been removed. Father Ernest Daly, who taught canon law at the seminary from 1951 to 1955, left the institution with no formal transfer. His departure date was recorded as pending for over a decade. When contacted during the 1980 review, he denied ever working at St. Benedict. However, payroll ledgers and a published photograph in a 1954 seminary bulletin confirmed his presence. His denial was not investigated further. Multiple facilities reports noted minor alterations to classroom layouts without explanation. Doors were sealed off and a network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Repetir. The first external indication that inconsistencies might exist within the seminary's administrative records came from a transportation ledger. In 1957, a routine audit of diocesan vehicle usage flagged St. Benedict Seminary for unusual mileage totals. One seminary vehicle, a diocesan-owned panel truck registered for delivery use, logged over 14,000 miles in a 10-month span, despite no recorded off-site deliveries. A request for route details received no reply. The truck was reassigned in 1958. It was later found to have been used exclusively within seminary grounds. That same year, the registrar's office at the diocese reported difficulty locating several academic transcripts from St. Benedict alumni. 4 ordination candidates listed St. Benedict as their primary seminary of formation, but their files contained only introductory coursework and no comprehensive evaluations. When questioned, the diocesan director of vocations cited irregularities in filing procedures. A follow-up inquiry was cancelled before interviews could be scheduled. Local newspaper archives from the surrounding counties include minimal references to the seminary. Its presence in civic life was limited, with few appearances in community bulletins or interfaith gatherings. Visiting clergy were rarely photographed. When Father Albin Marchand was appointed rector in 1947, the diocesan newsletter featured no announcement. By contrast, appointments at other seminaries in the region received multi-page coverage. Maintenance documents from 1962 showed work orders for the installation of reinforced locks on all internal classroom doors. The contractor's notation listed the job under security upgrade, though no break-ins or incidents had been reported. That same month, the seminary stopped printing its quarterly student bulletin. No reason was given. A personnel memo from March 1963 requested that the diocesan payroll office withhold public release of salary records for seminary staff until further clarification. This request did not align with established policy, which mandated biannual publication of salary brackets for all diocesan employees. No clarification followed, and the policy was not enforced in that instance. In 1965, a visiting lecturer from St. Anselm College filed a travel reimbursement request that included lodging at the seminary for a 4-day seminar on liturgical renewal. The form included a handwritten note stating that the lecture series had been cancelled upon arrival and that the facility appeared inactive. His request for clarification received no response, and the expense was reimbursed without comment. The diocesan legal office later confirmed that no seminar had been scheduled during that period. The seminary calendar had been left blank for both winter and spring terms. Enrollment during that academic year was listed as provisional. There were no photographs of classes from that term. By 1966, inquiries from other seminaries regarding transfer students began to show a pattern. Applications from individuals claiming partial study at St. Benedict frequently lacked corresponding transcripts or faculty references. Several applicants listed faculty names that did not match staff directories from the relevant years. In 2 cases, the same name appeared in different handwriting across separate applications. One letter of recommendation was typed on a form with no letterhead and contained a misprinted version of the seminary's Latin motto. The Diocesan Education Office began compiling inconsistencies into a separate file. By 1967, this file included 19 individuals whose clerical records could not be matched to existing personnel logs. Of these, 8 had been assigned to parish roles for short periods, with no official record of transfer or ordination. One served as a hospital chaplain for 6 months before resigning. His personnel file included a medical leave request with no physician's signature. In 1968, a former seminarian named Paul Henson submitted a written complaint to the bishop's office regarding faculty turnover and inconsistencies in coursework. He alleged that 2 instructors had left without notice during his final year and that no replacement professors were brought in. He claimed to have completed examinations without formal grading and described being asked to revise his own evaluation sheets. The bishop's office acknowledged receipt of the letter but filed it under student dissatisfaction. No follow-up occurred. Henson later left clerical training and was removed from the candidate registry. His account resurfaced in an internal memo 12 years later when archival inconsistencies became a subject of broader review. Additional warning signs appeared in the financial statements filed by the seminary between 1965 and 1969. Budget line items labeled guest faculty and temporary assignments grew significantly despite no public announcement of new hires. In 1969, the seminary reported over $17,000 in unitemized personnel expenditures. When asked to clarify, the rector submitted a single-page summary referencing unforeseen pastoral assistance and off-site clerical coverage. The Fiscal Oversight Committee accepted the summary without further review. No invoices or contracts were included in the report. Seminarians who attended during the final years before the seminary's closure in 1971 described an increasing absence of structured academic life. One alumnus recalled entire weeks without lectures, replaced by self-study sessions in the library. Faculty presence was minimal, and chapel attendance was no longer a network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Repetier existed for the shift in instruction methods, and class syllabi from that period show multiple entries marked as self-directed. The registrar's office discontinued issuing detailed term breakdowns. Instead, seminarians received a single-page summary of credits with a general notation, completed theological progression. One former student, interviewed anonymously during a later diocesan fact-finding process, stated that during his final semester he was advised not to submit his thesis. He was told by the acting academic director that his file had been closed early and that his ordination would proceed pending diocesan approval. When asked for clarification, he was referred to the Office of Priestly Formation, which had no record of his completed coursework. In 1969, a set of building plans submitted for tax reassessment revealed that several rooms in the administrative wing had been repurposed without notice. A second-floor archive room, previously designated for theological journals, had been listed as private correspondence. a category not recognized under diocesan filing standards. When assessors requested access to verify usage, they were informed that the rooms were undergoing renovations. No follow-up inspection occurred. At the same time, internal communications within the diocese began referencing St. Benedict less frequently. Meeting minutes from the Council of Vicar Generals omit any mention of the seminary between April 1969 and August 1970. During this time, diocesan seminarian placements were redirected to other institutions in New York and Pennsylvania. No statement was issued regarding the status of St. Benedict's operations. Correspondence from the Director of Seminary Relations noted a decline in inter-institutional communication. A letter sent to St. Benedict requesting participation in an academic roundtable was returned marked "Recipient unavailable." The envelope bore no forwarding address. The roundtable proceeded without their involvement, and their vacancy was not filled. A seminarian who withdrew in early 1970 cited confusion over administrative responsibility. He described a prolonged absence of any senior faculty on campus. According to his statement, meal services had been reduced to 2 per day, mail delivery ceased without explanation, and library hours were irregular. He left without submitting formal withdrawal papers and was later contacted by the diocese to confirm his departure. The diocesan inquiry into seminary conditions officially began in November 1970, prompted by a new bishop's decision to review inactive properties. Upon visiting the grounds, diocesan officials noted that only minimal staff remained. The main office was occupied by a single clerical secretary and 1 assistant assigned to maintenance. No faculty were present during the visit. Student housing was reportedly vacant. An internal memo following the site review stated that the physical plant appeared structurally sound but lacked current certification for occupancy. The buildings were described as underutilized and not prepared for winter term use. Heat had been disconnected in several wings, and utilities had been reduced to off-peak levels. The chapel still operated on a reduced schedule, with morning mass conducted by visiting clergy from nearby parishes. A handwritten attendance log showed no more than 4 participants per service. Confessional rooms had been emptied of furnishings, and the sacristy contained no updated inventories. Further inquiry into financial records uncovered a lack of receipts for purchases made between January and August of that year. The operating account showed repeated transfers labeled miscellaneous services, totaling over $12,000. These payments were issued to individuals not employed by the diocese. Checks were drawn from an account jointly registered to the seminary and an auxiliary education fund that had been inactive since 1959. Efforts to trace recipients were inconclusive. Contact information was outdated or incomplete. No tax documents had been filed under their names within diocesan records. The transactions were marked for audit, but were ultimately categorized as non-recoverable. When the diocesan review concluded in March 1971, the recommendation was made to suspend operations indefinitely. The official report cited declining enrollment, operational inefficiencies, and failure to comply with standardized instructional protocols. No mention was made of personnel inconsistencies or missing faculty. The closure was announced through a brief bulletin in the diocesan newsletter. The property would be retained as a retreat center, pending redevelopment. All remaining faculty and staff were listed as reassigned, although only 2 names appeared in subsequent diocesan directories. The same week, several alumni received notices requesting confirmation of their academic records. These forms were issued without explanation. Recipients were asked to provide transcripts, course details, and faculty signatures for all years attended. The response rate was low, and most returned forms contained incomplete data. Several former students wrote letters indicating they were unsure how to reconstruct timelines due to irregular teaching schedules and undocumented credit transfers. One such letter, sent from a former seminarian now serving in a parish school in Albany, noted that his final year had included only 3 identifiable instructors. He claimed that 2 of them were absent for most of the term and that he had not received examination results before his departure. His ordination proceeded regardless. The letter was placed into the archival file, but not addressed in any formal capacity. Later that year, The Diocesan Seminary Board convened to discuss the redistribution of archival holdings. A motion was passed to relocate St. Benedict's files to a restricted annex within the Central Chancery Archive. Only select documents were preserved. Several boxes were marked as duplicates and slated for disposal. A notation on the storage manifest read, "Pending contents verification," but no verification form was ever signed. Among the retained documents were attendance rosters from 1955 to a network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Repetir. By 1981, the Central Chancery Archive in Syracuse had completed a decade-long reorganization of its seminary records. During this process, an archivist named Leland Fahey, recently assigned to the diocese after finishing his degree in ecclesiastical library science, began compiling a cross-reference index of clergy placement histories. The intent was to ensure that ordination records aligned with active parish rosters, especially in preparation for the diocese's upcoming centennial. It was within this review that Fahey noted a recurring issue. St. Benedict Seminary graduates between 1952 and 1969 were frequently represented by gaps in their documentation. Placement letters existed without corresponding ordination certificates. Some had diocesan assignments on file, but no academic evaluations. Others had evaluation reports but no ordination notice. As Fahey expanded his index, he created a private log of anomalies. The list reached 25 names within 2 months. Several of these names matched entries in outdated yearbooks or newsletters from the seminary, but were absent from other diocesan materials. At the same time, the clerical census published by the Archdiocese listed only active personnel. Those marked unlocated or inactive were categorized without detail. Fahey requested access to restricted files from the former St. Benedict archives. His supervisor approved the request under routine data integrity review. What Fahey found included incomplete correspondence chains, financial summaries without receipts, and multiple envelopes containing unsigned letters. One such envelope, dated 1962, contained a draft addressed to the regional bishop's secretary. The draft referenced departure of 3 instructors following internal review, but was crossed out with a red pencil and never sent. More notably, the seminary's record of annual formational assessments, a standardized document required under diocesan guidelines, showed a sharp decline in submission consistency. Between 1963 and 1968, no complete sets existed. The evaluations that were present lacked faculty signatures and bore typed names with no formatting. Some were marked, "Entered retrospectively." Fahey began contacting other diocesan institutions to cross-verify placement records. A hospital chaplaincy in Shroon Lake listed a Father Ellis Byrne as serving from 1961 to 1962, yet no ordination record for Byrne could be located. His personnel file contained a photograph, an appointment letter from the diocesan office, and a brief bio referencing St. Benedict as his seminary. There were no academic transcripts, no evaluation letters, and no formal release notice. Further inquiry into Byrne's career path revealed that he had not served in any known parish following his chaplaincy. His file ended with the note, "Assignment concluded, no reassignment requested." A subsequent attempt to locate him in the clergy pension registry yielded no entry. His name did not appear in diocesan retirement rolls. Another example emerged with Father Leo J. Marino, listed as an assistant pastor in Glens Falls for 7 months in 1965. The parish record indicated he had resigned for personal reasons. No resignation letter was included. A form marked "Request for Laicization" was filled out in draft but not signed or dated. His contact address was left blank. By early 1982, Fahey had compiled 63 irregular cases, of which 25 were associated exclusively with St. Benedict. He presented his findings to the Diocesan Committee on Archival Continuity. The committee reviewed his documentation and recommended a limited internal investigation. They appointed Monsignor Darius Bellamy, then Chancellor of Clerical Affairs, to conduct interviews with surviving faculty and former administrative staff. Bellamy encountered resistance. Few former staff members were reachable. and those who responded cited poor recollection or declined to discuss former colleagues. One faculty member who had briefly taught Latin in the early 1960s claimed he had been instructed not to keep personal notes. Another declined to answer questions, stating he had already given statements to the diocese in 1979. Though no such statements were located, the administrative structure of the seminary had no clear continuity following its closure. While the property had been converted into a retreat center for several years, none of the staff who oversaw that transition had access to or familiarity with academic records. One retreat director admitted he had never entered the second floor of the main academic building, where former faculty offices were located. The area had been locked upon his arrival and remained so throughout his tenure. As Bellamy's inquiry progressed, he located an internal report authored by the auxiliary bishop who had audited the seminary just prior to its closure. The report, still marked confidential, noted that campus conditions had declined but made no mention of personnel gaps. However, an appendix listed several missing assets, among them student files labeled by cohort year. The report stated, "Files for a network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Repetier 4 and 1959 were found to be unrecoverable. No detail was provided regarding how or when these files had gone missing. The report did not recommend further inquiry, stating that archival reconciliation is no longer feasible due to age of records." Monsignor Bellamy, now operating without administrative backing, began a parallel effort to reach former seminarians from those same class years. He identified 11 individuals through outdated alumni directories. Of the responses he received, most were brief or dismissive. 2 stated they had no recollection of classmates listed in the same cohort. One individual confirmed he had been present during the academic year in question, but noted that several students were reassigned before ordination without formal announcement. One letter dated June 1982 came from a former student who had entered St. Benedict in 1955, but withdrew prior to graduation. His account described a campus marked by rotations in faculty, sudden departures, and changes in dormitory assignments without notice. He stated that in his final year, his assigned spiritual advisor ceased holding meetings and his coursework was reassigned to a visiting tutor, whose identity was never verified by the registrar. Bellamy submitted these findings in a memorandum to the Diocesan Administrative Office. The memo was filed under non-actionable anomalies and archived with other discontinued inquiries. No formal announcement was made. However, in late 1982, the diocese began quietly cross-referencing pension eligibility with seminary ordination records. A confidential summary noted that at least 8 individuals linked to St. Benedict had received provisional assignments without validated ordination status. At the same time, diocesan staff overseeing historical preservation began preparations for an exhibit on clerical education. The exhibit was scheduled to feature materials from all past seminaries in the region, including St. Benedict. When archival staff attempted to retrieve photographs from the seminary's library collection, they discovered that most visual records had been removed. An inventory list recovered from a sealed box indicated that over 200 photographic prints had been reassigned to auxiliary storage. No location was specified. Among the missing photographs was a group image dated 1960, believed to show the full faculty and administrative team. A reference copy of the image survived in a 1961 diocesan bulletin, but had been reprinted in low resolution. A note beneath the image in the bulletin read, "Names withheld by request." No prior edition included such a disclaimer. In early 1983, a retired diocesan secretary came forward with a collection of clerical memos and handwritten notes she had retained from her tenure in the bishop's office. Among these documents was a folded sheet labeled Benedict Anomalies, Staff Changes, listing 9 faculty members with years of unexplained departure. Next to 3 of the names were underlined notations, untraceable, no reassignment, and status uncertain. This document led Bellamy to request access to diocesan insurance records, which occasionally included details omitted from personnel files. Within these, he located 2 discontinued life insurance policies registered to faculty members listed as having departed from St. Benedict without further placement. Both policies had been cancelled within 1 year of issuance, with the reason field left blank. No beneficiaries were recorded. In parallel, property records revealed that a section of the former seminary grounds had been subdivided and leased for private retreat use in the mid-1970s. The lease agreement was handled by a diocesan legal officer who had since retired. The contract listed the lessee as a limited partnership based in Albany, with no identifiable religious affiliation. The retreat operation ceased within 4 years, and the structure was left vacant. In an effort to determine whether any documents had been stored in that building prior to its closure, Bellamy contacted the property office. A site inspection in May 1983 found that the structure had been cleared with only empty shelving units and a locked metal cabinet remaining. No records or contents were recovered. The cabinet was removed and placed in diocesan storage, but no inventory was filed. Following the accumulation of these fragmented records, Bellamy prepared a summary document outlining unresolved questions concerning St. Benedict Seminary. He listed 25 individuals whose departures remained undocumented, 7 faculty whose assignments ended without clarification, and 13 file references missing from both central and local archives. The report concluded with a request for administrative review. No formal response was issued. Internal communication logs suggest that the document was received and marked informational only. Within 2 months, Bellamy was reassigned to another administrative role, and his inquiry was discontinued. Leland Fahey, still employed in the archive, preserved copies of the report and its appendices. Over the following year, he quietly continued his review of diocesan education records. While conducting an unrelated inventory, he discovered that several duplicate files had been a network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Repetir. In 1991, the Diocese of Syracuse prepared for a formal reclassification of several former seminary properties. As part of this process, the Office of Historical Holdings authorized a final consolidation of legacy materials, assigning a records custodian to complete cataloging of all outstanding clerical education files. Leland Fahey, by then promoted to assistant archivist, resumed examination of stored documents related to St. Benedict Seminary. At a diocesan storage annex in the village of Lonsmere, Fahey opened a cabinet labeled SBS Retired. Inside were 32 folders bearing only partial titles, most with no contents. The labels were written in faded typewriter ink. One folder marked F. Marquand, 1963 Temp, contained a torn envelope and a single page of typewritten notes titled Activity Irregular, No Continuation. The page ended mid-sentence. Inventory records indicated the cabinet had been relocated from the Central Chancery Building during the 1973 storage overhaul. The relocation tag included a stamped note, Temporary Retention Await Destruction Schedule. No schedule was attached. Fahey began requesting interviews with former diocesan administrators who had worked during the seminary's final years. Many had retired or moved out of state. Among those who responded was a former assistant in clerical operations who had handled internal transfers during the 1960s. She recalled preparing documents for St. Benedict staff that were later retracted or left unsigned. One particular case involved a request from the rector for emergency credential certification for 3 unnamed individuals assigned to temporary faculty roles. The request lacked names, addresses, or prior placements. It was returned with a cover note requesting clarification. No response was recorded, and the matter was closed. Further investigation into insurance documentation showed that St. Benedict had filed unusually high premium adjustments during the years 1961, 1964, and 1967. The rationale listed was unfilled staff positions reassigned as interim housing. When Fahey attempted to cross-reference this explanation against staff housing rosters, he found only generic room assignments with no corresponding personnel. In late 1991, Fahey submitted a preservation request to formally accession the remaining St. Benedict materials into the permanent diocesan archive. The request was approved. During cataloguing, he noted that multiple files had been previously labelled under different departments, including one under Disciplinary Affairs and another under External Programming, neither of which were standard classifications for seminary documentation. The Disciplinary Affairs file contained 3 inter-office memos referencing facility usage questions during the 1965 academic term. Each memo concluded with a note indicating that records had been transferred off-site for review. The destination was not listed. A search of transfer logs for that period showed no documented movement. By spring 1992, the newly designated archive had completed its reorganization. An inventory report was issued, stating that all known files relating to St. Benedict Seminary had been consolidated under restricted access. The report noted unresolved documentation gaps and a lack of complete faculty listings for 8 non-consecutive years. In the months that followed, the archive received several inquiries from regional researchers seeking background on clerical education trends during the mid-20th century. Fahey prepared general summaries for use in academic publications, but omitted references to the inconsistencies. He filed a separate internal document, noting that these omissions were not intended to obscure facts, but to comply with the diocese's directive on finalized reports. The archive's final classification of St. Benedict materials listed only 3 faculty rosters as verified, with the remainder marked incomplete or missing. The official institutional summary was published with a disclaimer. Due to the closure circumstances and relocation of records, full verification of staff and student records from 1948 to 1970 cannot be guaranteed. In 1994, diocesan leadership transferred oversight of inactive institutional records to a third-party historical commission. This commission, formed to develop a standardized account of the diocese's educational legacy, opted not to pursue retrospective interviews or independent audits. They adopted the archive's summary report without amendments. The commission published a commemorative volume in 1995. Its entry on St. Benedict Seminary consisted of 2 pages, featuring a photograph of the main chapel and a brief timeline. The timeline listed founding, building expansion, operational years, and closure. It included no mention of faculty transitions or student attrition. That same year, a local heritage group organized a walking tour of religious properties throughout Onondaga County. St. Benedict's buildings were no longer standing, having been deconstructed in 1986 due to foundation instability. A historical marker installed on the grounds referred only to the original founding year and the seminary's role in regional clerical training. By the end of the decade, public awareness of the seminary's operational history had diminished. Clerical directories published for parish use no longer referenced St. Benedict as a point of origin for active priests. Even its name ceased to appear in ordination anniversary announcements or memorial liturgies. Within diocesan circles, however, internal cross-checks continued. Pension records were updated to reflect discrepancies in service histories, and inactive clergy were listed in appendices with the notation "status reconciled." No further clarification was provided. The original buildings, long dismantled, had been replaced by a youth retreat pavilion that used a portion A network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Repetier of the original foundation footprint, the new facility retained no architectural or administrative connection to the seminary, and staff had no access to archival records. The land lease agreement specified that all historical materials would remain under diocesan jurisdiction. In 1997, a diocesan office rebranding campaign removed references to St. Benedict from remaining web listings and printed guides. Seminarian formation charts were revised to exclude closed institutions, consolidating all historical records under legacy education centers. These changes were adopted for public communications without formal announcement. That same year, a set of photographs was anonymously delivered to the diocesan archive. They were enclosed in an unmarked envelope with no return address. Inside were 7 black and white prints dated between 1959 and 1966. All bore handwritten notes on the reverse, though none included full names. The images showed groups of clergy in informal settings around the seminary grounds. A few were labelled with first initials only. One photograph depicted 4 men seated at a long table beside what appeared to be a ledger or attendance sheet. A date written on the back read June 63rd, with a question mark inserted. Another image showed an exterior stairwell with an unfamiliar entrance, possibly indicating a structure not preserved in existing building plans. The architectural style suggested a detached annex not listed in property records. Fahey reviewed the photos but found no way to verify their origin. He placed them in a new folder labeled Unverified Visual Materials, SBS. The folder was filed under restricted access, consistent with other unclassified submissions. No follow-up inquiry was conducted. Over the next 3 years, clerical retirement audits included periodic reviews of unresolved placement anomalies. In 1999, the Diocesan Personnel Directory issued a revision that removed inactive listings over 25 years old unless legally required. This removed the remaining names associated with St. Benedict's disputed records. By the time of the diocese's centennial celebrations in 2001, no segment of the commemorative program addressed the seminary. Its name was omitted from banners, speaker introductions, and printed history displays. Attendees included several priests who had studied there during the 1960s, though no mention was made of their connection in event materials. The centennial publication released that autumn included a chapter titled The Training of Clergy in the Diocese of Syracuse. The chapter featured a timeline of educational institutions and noted the dates of active service. St. Benedict Seminary was given one sentence acknowledging its operation from 1913 to 1970, with no further commentary. Fahey, who remained employed in the archive through the early 2000s, submitted a private recommendation that the seminary's remaining unresolved files be digitally indexed for internal continuity. His proposal received limited support and was not prioritized. The files remained physically stored in locked cabinets within the secondary archive room. In 2005, when that room was renovated for environmental controls, the materials were transferred to a shared facility housing parish bulletins and sacramental registries. No catalogue update was issued. An inventory card affixed to the crate read only "Education Retired." By the late 2000s, interest in seminary history had shifted to comparative studies of curriculum development. Institutions like St. Benedict, which lacked comprehensive documentation, were excluded from most academic reviews. A scholarly article published in 2009 listed the seminary among defunct clerical programs with limited traceable outputs. In 2010, a diocesan policy was adopted to formalize the status of all closed educational facilities. Under this directive, institutions with unresolved clerical placements were classified as non-attributive. This term indicated that no current clergy would be administratively linked to the defunct facility for purposes of promotion, pension, or canonical record-keeping. The 25 individuals whose names had once been flagged in internal documentation were officially removed from open registries. Their files, where present, were labeled Inactive Reconciliation Complete. No additional explanation accompanied this status. The remaining contents of St. Benedict's archive now consisted primarily of indirect references, secondary communications, duplicated reports, blank evaluation forms, and personnel rosters with redacted annotations. Pages marked with incomplete signatures or crossed-out assignments had been indexed but not cross-verified. No final audit was conducted. As of 2023, the Diocesan Archives Public Guide listed St. Benedict Seminary as a historical property with restricted documentation. Access required written request, justification of research purpose, and approval from the Office of Ecclesial Heritage. Only one such request had been granted in the previous 15 years. The last documented update to any St. Benedict file occurred in 2012, when a digital image of a commencement program was added to the visual archive. The image was submitted by a local collector and confirmed by a former clerical typist as authentic. The names on the program included 2 individuals previously listed in discrepancy logs. No action was taken based on this discovery. The program was logged and archived under uncorroborated ceremonial documents. At present, the grounds of the former seminary are maintained as a nature retreat. No signage references the institution that once stood there. Public access is limited to seasonal reservations. Visitors pass through wooded trails that follow paths once used by seminarians. No physical structures remain. Institutionally, the seminary is no longer referenced in diocesan materials. Its records remain silent, with no formal closure narrative, no acknowledgement of administrative irregularity, and no reconciliation process for its faculty. The disappearance of the 25 priests, while documented across fragmented sources, remains unaddressed in any official capacity. Among the final remaining clerical forms attributed to St. Benedict Seminary, one undated document contained a typewritten table listing retreat rotations for visiting clergy. The entries spanned 8 columns with initials under the headings Arrival, Liturgical Designation, Assignment, and Departure, but more than half the rows lacked complete information. Several names appeared without title or diocesan affiliation. A marginal note written in pencil read, "Confirm on-site presence not verified." The document was filed in a miscellaneous envelope labeled Non-Academic Engagements. When archivist Leland Fahey reviewed the folder in 2013 during a collection reassessment, he marked the entries as non-verifiable likely administrative placeholders. The file was retained under restricted access with no further notation. That same year, the Diocesan Council on Historical Holdings initiated a program encouraging retired clergy to contribute written accounts of their service experiences. Most entries focused on parish work, overseas missions, or ecumenical events. A small number referenced time spent at St. Benedict. These entries were brief and non-specific, often describing the seminary as quiet, formal, or removed from daily contact. Only one submission included a description of a departure from the seminary midterm. The author noted that his reassignment occurred without personal request, accompanied by a one-line directive issued by the rector's assistant. He stated he had never received an exit interview or official notice of his academic standing. The statement was marked as received, but was not integrated into the council's formal publication. The council discontinued the program in 2015. Archival submission forms were collected and stored under a separate collection code. No further solicitations were made for testimonials regarding St. Benedict or other closed seminaries. In 2016, a new diocesan digital platform launched with a section devoted to institutional legacy. St. Benedict Seminary received a single-page summary linking to the diocesan historical timeline. The summary listed founding and closure dates, architectural features, and founding clerical leadership. It did not include operational details or personnel names. Requests to access physical documents through the online portal were redirected to a general archival inquiry form. These requests required institutional affiliation and subject specificity. As of 2022, no access had been granted for St. Benedict materials since the platform's launch. In 2018, an independent researcher from a theological institute in Massachusetts submitted a Freedom of Information request for archived communications relating to clerical placements from the seminary between 1950 and 1970. The diocese denied the request, citing ecclesiastical exemption and confidentiality of clerical records under canon law. Later that year, diocesan leadership revised internal file retention policy, reclassifying outdated seminary materials as historical trace records. Under this policy, materials not directly impacting canonical standing or pension verification were removed from active retention. A percentage were designated for microfilming, while others were prepared for deep storage with limited access. The St. Benedict collection was among those selected for storage. During the transition, archivists boxed remaining documents into acid-free containers marked with barcode identifiers. Each box was labeled only by institution name and date range. A note inside one container listed contents as partial inventories, yearbooks, unfiled memos, incomplete rosters. The boxes were transferred to a diocesan storage facility located beneath the Chancery's administrative building. The space, climate-controlled and designated for permanent record housing, was not open to the public. Indexes were kept offline and could only be accessed by internal personnel. In 2021, the final known clerical employee with direct academic service at St. Benedict passed away. The obituary listed his parish assignments, but did not mention the seminary. No eulogy or diocesan article made reference to his years of faculty service. His personnel file was moved to inactive status and archived. In the months following, the diocese updated its published list of affiliated educational centers. St. Benedict was removed from all drop-down menus and sidebar entries on the public site. Its location was omitted from the interactive diocesan map. The clerical census released the following spring showed no active priests with St. Benedict listed in their educational history. Pension ledgers continued to include reconciliation notes, but used institution-neutral language. The term Regional Formation Center replaced all seminary names for inactive entries. No attempt was made to compile a final faculty directory. A partial list recovered in 1982 remained the only existing reference, though it included handwritten question marks beside multiple names. The diocese has not indicated plans to complete or verify the list. In private correspondence between former archival staff, mentions of the seminary have grown infrequent. One retired cataloger who worked briefly during the 1991 consolidation wrote in a personal note that he could never fully reconcile the absence of direct evidence with the weight of internal allusion. The letter was never filed with any official report. Today, the property once occupied by St. Benedict Seminary is marked only by a boundary post and a map reference in the Retreat Pavilion's Welcome Center. A brief mention in a local history brochure describes it as a former institution of formation, active until the early 1970s. The text does not mention the number of students who studied there, the number ordained, or any faculty names. The woods surrounding the site are now part of a protected natural area. Walking trails extend across the former dormitory ridge and pass near what had been the administrative annex. No markers indicate these features. If this story impacted you, if you stayed until the end, it's because you feel these hidden truths also need to be exposed. So leave in the comments the city you're watching from. This way we can see how far these stories are reaching, and subscribe to the channel. There are many other cases the world tried to forget, but we insist on remembering. This story is fictional. All names have been edited to protect the source. This video is for entertainment purposes only. But here's a disclaimer. It's based on historical facts.